Identity and family relations is probably an area that has been less explored. As you know, the Convention on the Rights of the Child recognizes that every child not only has the right to be registered immediately after birth, but it also says in Article 7 that children have the right to a name, a nationality, and to family relations. And whilst the birth registration is probably one of the aspects of identity that is better understood, still not achieved. We still don't have universal birth registration, but it is understood, and it is something that many actors are prioritizing and working on, including UNICEF, for quite some time. Likewise, when it comes to the right of every child to have a nationality, UNICEF has been working for quite some time now to ensure that governments recognize every child's right to a nationality, and to prevent statelessness, childhood statelessness, and to ensure that children are protected from statelessness. An area that has been less explored, although I think we have all been working on this area for quite some time, is the right of a child to maintain family relations. So as a starting point, of course, UNICEF works to protect families, to ensure that children can grow up within their family as far as possible. But we do know that there are many situations where, unfortunately, children, for one reason or the other, either cannot remain within their family environment. And it is in these situations that we have to be particularly careful that the right of children to maintain their family relations is protected. For example, in the case of adoption, we know over decades of practice, both in national adoption and in intercountry adoption, that sometimes there have been illicit practices. In fact, we know that many governments at the moment are reviewing their historic cases, in particular of intercountry adoption, only to find out and issue reports indicating that there were illicit practices, for example, improper financial gains being made, etc., or children being taken from their biological parents without the consent of those parents, putting those children up for adoption. So in that case, of course, we have children who then grow up, who were adopted, who will not be able to know who their biological parents were if that information was not securely and safely and confidentially stored, for example, by the civil registrar, in a way that those children who have now grown up can access that information and find out about their origins. Similarly, there is the increasing practice of surrogacy. This practice has now significantly surpassed the practice of adoption, in particular intercountry adoption. And again, through children born through surrogacy may not always be able later on in life to establish their genetic origins and to know who were the donors who provided the gametes for which ultimately led to their birth. There are many rights that are at risk for these children because not only may they not know their family origins, their genetic makeup, they may not. It may impact their right to health because they don't have that genetic information and know who the donor was. But also, in addition, in surrogacy arrangements and in the practice of surrogacy, there's also potential for sale of children, and therefore these children, which is prohibited under the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, children should not be be sold. So there is a lot of risks, and these can all impact the child's right to family relations. There are also other situations in which the child's right to family relations may be impacted. That is particularly in humanitarian contexts. We know that in humanitarian contexts, children are sometimes separated from their parents. They may be moving, migrating, or they may be displaced because of conflicts or natural disasters. They may be separated from their parents and caregivers. And we have a lot of unaccompanied and separated children who may not be able to either because of their young age, to explain who their parents are, or their documents or their birth certificates and other identifying documents may be lost or during the humanitarian scenario. It's very important that we prioritize family tracing, family reunification, and do everything within our power to reunite these children with their parents, because otherwise their right to family relations may be jeopardized. And finally, there is also another scenario in which family relations can be at risk. That is when children are placed in alternative care. So we know that in many countries around the world, children are placed by their parents or by social welfare institutions into residential care, or in some cases large institutional facilities. Many of these children are there sometimes because of poverty, not necessarily for any other protection measure, but simply because they are poor, or because they are disabled, or they have a disability. And unfortunately, sometimes the information about their parents is not adequately adequately stored, and sometimes it's not always possible to know exactly who their parents are, where they are, and unfortunately they lose the opportunity to maintain those family relations over time.